She played over in Australia. She's been an MVP over there and a champion. And, you know, it took her how long to make an Olympic team?
In the warm glow of the Clark family living room in West Des Moines on a quiet December evening in 2024, as the icy Iowa wind rattled against the windows and the soft hum of the central heating created a cocoon of warmth, the mantelpiece told its own story, lined with family photos of 3 children who had each, in their own way, carved out remarkable paths in sport. And yet beneath the photographs and the laughter of holiday evenings past, there were stories never spoken aloud, feelings long, buried beneath the surface of love, loyalty, and quiet rivalry. And it was on this night, as the Christmas tree twinkled gently in the corner, that Blake Clark finally found the courage to say words that had been weighing on his heart for over a decade. Words he had rehearsed silently in his mind but never dared to give voice to until now, as he sat across from his younger sister, Caitlin, who by then was no longer just a local prodigy but a household name across America, one of the brightest stars in basketball. And he said softly, his voice thick with honesty, "Caitlin, I need to tell you something I've never admitted to anyone. There were times when I was jealous of you, jealous of the attention, the opportunities, the way everyone saw you as the special one in our family. And though the words were not spoken with bitterness, they carried the heavy complexity of sibling love, that strange mixture of admiration and envy, pride and insecurity, that can take years of maturity to unravel." And as Caitlin sat in stunned silence, trying to process what her brother had confessed, Blake continued, his tone steadier now, as though a floodgate had opened, and he explained how, as the eldest child, he had once been the family's shining athlete, the quarterback at Dowling Catholic High School whose arm and leadership had won games under Friday night lights, the one who earned a scholarship to Iowa State University. And for years he had been the star, the center of attention, the child whose name was in the local papers, whose games drew family gatherings and cheers. And yet, as Caitlin's talent in basketball emerged when she was barely 10 years old, he began to feel the subtle shift, conversations at family dinners slowly turning towards her latest tournament performance. The phone calls from recruiters that once came for him now redirected toward his sister, and though Blake always smiled and congratulated her, though he cheered from the sidelines and genuinely wanted her to succeed, inside he was battling feelings he neither understood nor wanted to admit. The ache of being replaced, of going from the main character in the family's sporting narrative to a supporting role in Caitlin's meteoric rise. And the hardest part was that he loved her too much to resent her. So instead he swallowed those emotions, burying them beneath quiet sacrifices she never even realized he was making. Like when the family budget strained under the costs of elite basketball travel, and Blake, during his college summers, took extra shifts and sent money home without explanation, or when he drove hours back from Ames after grueling practices just to rebound for Caitlin in the driveway, feeding her passes deep into the night. And when she once asked, "Why do you always come home to help me practice?" he replied with a smile, "Because that's what big brothers do. We help our little sisters become great." And she had accepted it as simple brotherly devotion, never suspecting the hidden complexity, that each pass he fed her was both an act of love and a reminder of how his place in the family story had shifted, how he was no longer the one being cheered for, but the one helping another shine. And though Caitlin's high school stardom only accelerated, with national headlines, recruiting buzz, and a spotlight that grew brighter every season, Blake tried to hold on to his identity as more than just Caitlin Clark's brother. Yet the contrast was painful, for while she soared, his own football career, though respectable, never reached the same heights. And in the quiet of his Iowa State dorm room he would watch her games on television, his heart swelling with pride, his voice hoarse from shouting at the screen. But afterwards, when the commentators gushed about her brilliance, when reporters crowded the family in the stands, he felt that peculiar invisibility, the way he was acknowledged only as an appendage to her story, never as the protagonist of his own. And though he never begrudged her the spotlight, he longed for someone to remember the boy who had once been the family's star. By the time Caitlin led Iowa to the 2023 Final Four, Blake was there, in the stands, screaming louder than anyone, his chest pounding with pride, tears in his eyes as the arena roared for his sister's brilliance. And yet afterwards, as reporters swarmed the Clark family, their microphones and cameras angled toward Caitlin, he felt the pang of being unseen, standing nearby but almost ghost-like, acknowledged only in relation to her, not for himself, and this duality. Pride so deep it hurt, mixed with the sting of obscurity, had lived inside him for years, until this December night when the family was finally quiet, the world outside covered in snow, and he could finally confess the truth he had carried silently for so long. Caitlin listened, stunned, her heart aching as she realized for the first time the depth of what her brother had endured, and she reached out, her hand clasping his, her eyes shimmering not only with sadness but with love, and she said, "Blake, I never knew. I never wanted you to feel like you were in my shadow because I've always looked up to you, I still do. You were the reason I believed I could do this, the one who taught me how to push myself, who made me tough, who believed in me when I doubted myself. You've always been my example." And as the words tumbled out, Blake felt a release he had not known he needed. Because for years he had carried the silent fear that his role had been diminished, that his sacrifices were invisible, when in truth Caitlin had been carrying his influence in her heart all along, modeling her determination on his example, drawing strength from his commitment, even if she had not said it until this night. Their conversation deepened, spilling into stories of childhood games in the driveway, of late nights when Blake returned home to rebound for her, of the small sacrifices he thought went unnoticed, only for Caitlin to tell him that she remembered the feeling of knowing her big brother was always there, quietly shaping her path. And in that living room, surrounded by family photos and the warmth of Christmas lights, something shifted permanently between them, for Blake finally understood that. Though his name might not appear in headlines, his fingerprints were all over Caitlin's journey, woven into the very fabric of her story, and Caitlin finally understood the cost of her own success, the silent burdens her brother had carried so she could shine, and she vowed never again to let him feel unseen. What neither of them knew was that this conversation would ripple outward, reshaping how all the Clark siblings understood their roles in each other's lives. For what emerged from that December evening was the truth that success in a family is never the achievement of a single person, but the shared legacy of sacrifice, encouragement, rivalry, and love, and that sometimes the greatest victories are not the ones celebrated in arenas, but the quiet ones won in living rooms, when siblings finally strip away pride and fear to reveal the unspoken truths that bind them forever. And in that moment, Blake and Caitlin realized that their bond had never been defined by comparison, but by the invisible thread of love that had carried them both through triumph and struggle, proving that family is not about whose star shines brightest, but
down to three. Becker buries it. It's fourth worst in the W. Salon.
On a quiet December evening in 2024, as the winter winds swept across West Des Moines and rattled the windows of the Clark family home, Blake Clark finally voiced the feelings that had lived unspoken in his heart for years. The living room, decorated with family photographs that told the story of three athletic siblings, carried the warmth of memory and shared history as Blake turned to his sister Caitlin and admitted that there were times he had been jealous of her, jealous of the spotlight, the endless attention, and the way the world seemed to anoint her as the special one in their family. His words carried the weight of years, the complexity of sibling love that blends admiration with envy, pride with hidden pain. For Blake, the question that had followed him for years, how does it feel to be Caitlin Clark's brother, had stung deeply, not because he resented her achievements, but because it reduced his own identity to a shadow of hers, leaving him invisible in the eyes of others. What Caitlin had never fully realized was that while she was making headlines, breaking records, and leading Iowa to the Final Four, her older brother was quietly making sacrifices for her dream. From taking summer jobs to ease family expenses to driving home, exhausted from Iowa State, just to rebound shots for her in their driveway. Blake had been her protector, her encourager, her biggest fan, yet also a young man struggling to find where he fit in once his own star dimmed in comparison. Sitting together that Christmas, Blake's voice broke the silence with a confession that had been bottled up for over a decade. He loved her, admired her, celebrated her victories, but there were moments he felt unseen, as though his own accomplishments no longer mattered. Caitlin, stunned and moved, reached for his hand and told him she had no idea, apologizing instinctively before Blake reassured her he wasn't seeking pity, only truth. He explained that his jealousy had never been about her, but about his own insecurities, and that over time he realized what a privilege it was to witness greatness up close, to be part of the unseen foundation that had helped her rise. Tears filled Caitlin's eyes as she told him that he hadn't just been part of her support system. He had been its very core, the brother who showed up when others didn't, who defended her against criticism, who celebrated her victories as if they were his own, teaching her the meaning of unconditional love. Their conversations stretched late into the night, unraveling years of silence. Blake spoke of the struggle to form his identity beyond the role of Caitlin's brother, while Caitlin revealed how profoundly his encouragement had steadied her during the moments of doubt when she questioned herself most. By the end of their talk, she told him something he would never forget. Every record she broke, every achievement she earned, had begun with a big brother who taught her that family meant showing up even when it was hard. Blake smiled, the burden lifting, and replied that her success had not diminished his life but enhanced it. Because he wasn't just Blake Clark, he was Blake Clark, the brother who helped raise a champion. In that moment, the jealousy that had once quietly haunted him transformed into pride, not only in his sister but in the role he had played in her journey. They both understood that their relationship had never been weakened by Caitlin's success. Instead, it had been refined by honesty, sacrifice, and love. The quiet courage of that night taught them that real victories don't always come in arenas or under bright lights, but in the honesty of family living rooms.